Hello everyone, my name is Monica. Welcome to my channel. In this live class, I'm going to show you how to create a custom template for your pleated patch pocket. So let me show you exactly what I mean. So I have a tote bag that I recently made, and this is the lining, and I've added this beautiful pleated patch pocket on both sides of my tote bag. I think this type of pocket is a great kind of upgrade to just a normal plain patch pocket. What I like the most is that you can keep a lot of stuff inside and you don't have to worry about your bag kind of bunching up and kind of getting out of shape because your items that you are storing inside. So by creating this type of pocket with pleats, you adding extra space to the inside of your pocket. So that's why I really like them. So what you want to do first is to decide how large is your pocket. So don't worry about thinking of seam allowances, don't worry about thinking of how large is the pleat. At the moment, all you want to do is to decide how wide and how tall is your finished pocket. So just as you see it. So imagine you are making just a regular plain patch pocket. You would cut a square or a rectangle. This is exactly what you want to think of as of right now. So for example, let's say you want your pocket to be about 20 centimeters wide and then 10 centimeters tall. That would be the size of the rectangle that you need to draw on a piece of paper. So let's start. So if you want to follow me along, you will need to grab some paper, ruler, some pens or pencils, paper, scissors, and glue. That's all you need for today. So for the purpose of this lesson, I'm using a marker so you can clearly see on the camera. And I'm just going to draw a random rectangle on my paper, just for the demonstration purposes. So decide how large is your pocket and then draw a rectangle in that size. Here we go. Next, what you want to do is to decide where you want your pleats. So for example, my pocket has pleats on both sides, and they are relatively close to the edge of my pocket. So let me just bring this closer to the camera. Here you can see is the edge of the pleat. You can see the top stitching, and the actual pocket ends here. So I've made my pocket. I placed the pleats about 1 centimeter away from the edge of my pocket. So that's about 3/8 of an inch. You can decide where you want your pleats. If you want them more in the center of your pocket, or if you prefer the edge of your pleat to be exactly at the edge of your pocket. This is totally up to you. The steps, the process of creating your own pattern, your own template is exactly the same regardless of where you want to add those pleats. So let's just stick to what I usually do, which is I leave about 1 centimeter space between the edge of my pleat and the edge of my pocket. So what you want to do now is to take a ruler and a pencil and draw a guideline where you want the edge of your pleat. So I'm using pink marker so it is easier for you to see on the camera without getting confused by too many lines. You can just use normal pencil. And since I'm adding pleats on both sides, I've marked those 2 lines on each side of my pocket, of my rectangle. If you want to add just 1 pleat only on one side of your pocket, you can do that, but then your pocket will be asymmetrical, just keep that in mind. This can be a feature if you want to do that, otherwise it can look a little bit off. So I actually prefer to keep everything symmetrical. Once you've got those 2 guidelines indicating the edge of your pleat, what you want to do is to decide how deep is your pleat. So again, if we look at my bag, my pocket, hopefully you can see that. You can see that my pleat is about 1.5 centimeter wide. So let me just bring that closer to the camera. So you can see this little zigzag. That's the depth of my pleat. And what you want to do is to decide how deep is that pleat. So you can either pick a random number if you want, or use a specific number. So for the purpose of this lesson, let's say I want my pleat to be about 2 centimeters deep. It's easier to measure on a paper. So once you've got that number, what you need to do is to cut your pattern along those 2 guidelines and add extra space so you can actually create those pleats with your fabric. So let me show you what I like to do. I typically use what I call a slash and spread method, and it is exactly how it sounds. So you're going to cut your template along those 2 lines, and then we're going to spread it to add extra space for our pleat. So I'm going to do that on one side first. So grab extra piece of paper. I'm going to give myself a guideline. And now I'm going to add glue so I can stick that extra piece of paper to create my pleat. Just like that. So, since I want my pleat to be 2 centimeters deep, what I need to do is to double the amount to create the actual template. So whatever measurement you decided for the depth of your pleat, double the amount. So if I take my tape measure, sometimes I like to take my tape measure just to kind of give myself an idea of how large I actually want those pleats. That can depend on the size of your pocket, or that you want to create, on the size of the project that you are making, and also on the size and the shape of the items that you are planning to store inside. What I want to mention before we proceed is that the larger those pleats are, the wider those pleats are, the top edge, then what it can happen is that the top edge of your pocket can be a little bit floppy. So just keep that in mind. You could use something like Velcro or maybe magnetic snap to keep this top in position, in place. Otherwise, you could add a little connector with a maybe press snap, or even a flap, or something like a zipper if you know how to assemble this type of pocket. So there are a few options that you can try and use to create very customizable pleated patch pocket. But what I always do is to add about 1.5 to 2 centimeters of depth to my pocket, which means that I have enough space for quite large items, because as you can see, this spread quite deep. I can open it quite wide. So I just wanted to mention that. So now that I know that I want my pleat to be about 2 centimeters deep, I'm going to take my ruler and double the amount to create my template. So I'm going to measure 4 centimeters and draw a parallel line across, just like that. Next, you want to keep everything straight so you can extend the bottom and the top of your pocket. And now what you want to do is to glue the other piece that you've cut away. Remember, we've added 1 centimeter here, so we want to make sure we keep that on our draft, on our template. So you can either glue this back on, or if you've got extra paper like me, just measure it and redraw it. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. So I can be in this piece so I don't get confused. And now we need to do exactly the same thing on the other side to keep our template, our pocket symmetrical. So let me just quickly do that. Again, you want to cut your template along that guideline. Then you need to add extra space depending on the size of your pleat. So again, I'm going to measure 4 centimeters because that is the size of my pleat, and draw a line. And then I'm going to extend the bottom and the top edge, just like before. And again, if you need to, glue this smaller piece or redraw it if you've got extra paper. Here you go. So this is now the actual size of our finished pocket. So we don't need any more glue. So let me just put it aside. So now what you want to do is to annotate your template and add seam allowance. So what I like to do is to add as many annotations as possible what this rectangle is in the future. It is very easy to forget what those pieces are after a certain amount of time. If you don't use the same template over and over again, you can kind of forget what you made it for. So for me, what I like to do is to add notches where I need to create my pleats. Since I have those guidelines here, I'm going to use them, and instead I'm just going to mark them. So what I like to do is to add numbers 1 and 2, or you can add a notch and name it N1 and 2 for notch 1, notch 2. I'll do that on the other side as well, just like that. Then you can even color the inside of your pleat and add an arrow indicating how you need to fold it. So this is totally up to you. Or write a note, this is a pleat, fold it towards the outer edge. Do whatever is easier for you. You need to understand your own patterns in the future. Next, what you want to do is to add a grain line so you know exactly how to cut out your fabric. So since this is the front of my pocket, I know this is the width of my pocket and this is the height of my pocket. My grain line runs like this. So I'm going to take my ruler now and draw a parallel line to my sides, since those corners are at 90 degrees. So you want to keep it 90 degree, or keep your grain line perpendicular to the base or to the bottom edge of your pocket. Because if you are using directional print, you want to make sure to cut your fabric in the right direction. And next, we're going to add a label. So you can add whatever note on your label. I typically add the name of the project or the name of the pattern that this pocket is a part of, then the name of the actual pocket. So I'm just going to call this bag number 1, and then pleated patch pocket. And next you can add the cutting information, so you know what fabric you need to cut it from. So since I've added my pocket to the lining of my tote bag, I need to cut my pocket twice from lining fabric. So this is exactly what I would write on my label. If you want to add your pocket to the outer of your bag, then you would have to cut it one time from external fabric and then one time from your lining fabric. So change the label accordingly to where you are adding your pocket. And lastly, before we cut it out, we need to add seam allowance. So this really depends on your preference. I typically use 1 centimeter seam allowance. That's about 3/8 of an inch. That's my kind of standard seam allowance on most of my patterns and most of my projects. So this is exactly what I'm going to add to this template. So to add seam allowance, you need to measure the distance and then draw a parallel line around all sides of your pocket template. So it is pretty straightforward. Since you are adding a patch pocket on top of your main panel, at this point you don't really have to pay attention to the actual seam allowance. If, for example, you are hacking an existing pattern and the seam allowance is different on that particular pattern. As long as you know that you've added certain amount, let's say 1 centimeter or a 1/2 inch seam allowance to your pocket, you'll be able to create the pocket in the required size that you want. So now all we have to do is to just cut our template, and then I'm going to show you how you need to actually pleat or fold this pocket to create your pleats. So let's just cut out our template. Here we go. What I like about this method is that you can already see that you've added seam allowance, how much seam allowance you've added, so you don't even have to worry about adding extra annotations to your pattern. But if you want, you can also add seam allowance included and then write the amount. That's an option as well. But since I already see that I've added my seam allowance, I've added my pleats, I typically just stick to this label of the basic information that I need. So to create your pleat, what you want to do is to fold your template along the line number 1 or along the notch number 1. So you would have to mark your notches along the bottom and top, so you know exactly how to fold your fabric. So you would fold your paper or your fabric along notch or line number 1. You would do that on both sides. So this is what it looks like. And then you would bring this folded edge and align it along the second line, or notch number 2. So let me just show you quickly what it looks like. Just like that. And you would do that on the other side as well. And now I have the size of my pocket, the initial size of my pocket, with those pleats on both sides. So now I'm ready to cut out my fabric and actually create my pleated patch pocket. So yeah, so that's basically it. That's basically what it looks like when your template is finished. So I hope you enjoyed this very short demonstration. I filmed a sewing tutorial for this pocket, so next week, probably, if I finish editing this tutorial, I will add it to my YouTube channel. So just in case, if you aren't sure how to actually construct this type of pocket, don't worry, I'll have a tutorial coming very, very soon. I don't want to leave you hanging, just in case, if you are new to bag making, if you are new to sewing, or if you've never tried to make this type of pocket. They are very, very easy to make, very quick, and they are very handy on various types of projects. So that's basically all I wanted to share with you today. If you have any questions, if you are watching replay and you aren't sure about anything, just drop a comment below this video and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Basically, I try to answer all my questions as soon as possible. So if you've got any ideas for future videos, if you want to see specific pocket, specific tutorial, also let me know in the comments. I always take your advice, your suggestions very seriously, because I want to make sure I share as much information as possible, but I want to make sure the information that I share is useful to you. So I hope that this type of pocket is going to be very, very handy and helpful to you, and you're going to have a lot of use out of it. So that's all from me today. I hope to see you in the next video. See you next time. Stay crafty, friends. Bye.